Do you think you can relate to a story where a plant and AI have authority over the world? This is Power, Corruption, and Comics. Far Sector was published in 2019 by J.K. Nemesis, which is somewhat relatable to the real world. It's about Jo Mullein, an ex-cop/soldier who has the opportunity to be Green Lantern for a year. She's assigned to the city Enduring, which is a civilization run by a council representing the three races that live there. The At, which are AI, the Ketopli, who are plant people, and the Na, who are somewhat human-like. The leaders found that the emotions are the root of all crime and designed and forced the emotion exploit on its citizens, banning them from all emotions. After the outlaw, a drug called Switch Off is made, though, to bypass the emotion exploit, making that the only way to feel emotion. Joe is assigned to the planet because the first murder since the emotion exploit has taken place. But while solving the case, Joe discovers that the emotion exploit was forced onto the civilization, and the government has been involved in many underground operations regarding both drugs. Far Sector introduces the emotion exploit and switch off to explore and highlight the idea that most institutionalized power is derived from corruption. The government spreads the disease and sells the cure, highlighting its fight for power against the people. In Far Sector, Joe finds a sweatshop owned by Marth, a member of the council that produces intellectual property, which is property created by emotion. With the world stripped of the emotion, switch off is the only way to produce these intellectual properties. And the public wants these intellectual properties to actually feel like they're feeling something. This meant that the government was making money and gaining power off of the switch-off addicts. Similar events can be seen in the real world. In 1996, the CIA was accused of being involved in drug trafficking targeted towards the black communities of Los Angeles. The Contras were a rebel group based in Nicaragua and other various Central American countries, but they were also involved in the production and trafficking of narcotics to fund their vision. Narcotics were criminalized in the 1920s, so the drugs had to be smuggled in the U.S. for sale. CIA agents were accused of being involved in the smuggling of said drugs in the U.S., but the most blatant and news-backed accusation when they were caught lending services and aircraft to the Contras for them to use for the smuggling. These were not proven to be rogue CIA agents because they turned a blind eye when they were accused of these crimes. The CIA hoped the Contras attempt their overthrow of the Nicaraguan dictatorship so that their government would not cause any violence in the future, which in theory was not a bad deed, but created problems for the marginalized and the impoverished, which they did not mind. The Trinity Council banned emotions with the emotion exploit, but then sold switch off to gain money and thus power. Just as the United States government made narcotics illegal, then proceeded to sell the prior criminalized narcotics to keep the stability of its power. Far Sector uses the emotion exploit and switch off to show how governments can spread the disease and sell the cure in efforts to hold their power. The government punishes those that attempt to expose its corruption. However, Thorne is a board of the Trinity Council and finds valuable information regarding the homicide case that Mullein was sent for. When he attempts to bring this information to Mullein, his body is hacked and starts attacking Mullein with killer robots and killed after his body attacks Mullein. Although the mercenaries are at their employer is most likely an anonymous member of the Trinity Council. Alvarez was attempting to expose the corruption of the Trinity Council and is punished for his pursuit of justice. Many instances, including recently, have occurred when someone mysteriously goes missing or dies after threatening to expose those in power for their heinous acts. A recent example of this is the Jeffrey Epstein case in 2019. While being a successful financer, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested and jailed under the allegations that he was part of a major human trafficking ring involving many of the higher-ups. He met with the jail psychologist many times, who was convinced Epstein had no intentions of committing suicide, but was later found dead due to an apparent suicide. The suicide took place before his court date, where he could have exposed the corrupt politicians and leaders also involved in the trafficking ring. He also took a plea deal once before, exposing some of his co-conspirators for involvement in a prostitution case, so his conspirator killers could have expected him to expose and render them powerless. Alfred Thorne was punished for attempting to expose the council of their heinous acts, just as, although conspiracy, Epstein was punished for attempting to expose the government officials of their disgusting crimes. Far Sector uses Thorne's death to highlight the idea that government punishes those that attempt to expose its corruption. Although it's just a graphic novel, Far Sector is more than just a fan fiction and dives deep into modern societal problems.